We were crazy in a nice way, and we never gave up. We had to make things happen. You had to bring everybody on board with you. Men would have put barriers in the way. Women with old-fashioned ideas would have put barriers in the way. Come and watch us, and then we'll have a chat after. Somebody came in to try and steal the trophy.
Do they not realise you're rugby players?
You'd be after them and they would be screwed.
Hundreds of thousands of people will enjoy the World Cup 2025.
I've got goosebumps.
Same, I was just about to say that. In this episode, we're joined by Gill Burns, who was part of the World Cup winning team back in 1994, lifting the Rugby World Cup for the first time. It was an amazing, amazing time for women's rugby, and it's just progressed from there. She's also been awarded an MBE for her services to the sport. She was the president of the Rugby Football Union for Women. She's just an all-round superstar, really. And we've heard a little rumour, haven't we, Jodie?
Yeah, never mind the rugby. I've heard you're a good dancer.
Oh. Well, I've got a pair of tap shoes still, and I'm perhaps too big to be a ballerina these days, but yeah, I'm a qualified dance teacher.
Really?
Yeah, my mum was a dance teacher. So I think part of my inner strength when I started playing rugby was that core stability you get from being a dancer. And elevation in the line out. The days before lifting, I used to jump higher than lots of other people. So my mother used to say, it's the dance coming out in it.
It's the dancing.
Demi-plie and rise.
Yeah.
And the line out.
And hold, hand down.
Were you a ballerina at all?
No, I did do tap dance, but I got told that I sounded like an elephant coming into the dance room. So I think that's why I sort of went to more contact sports. But
Amazing. When did you decide not to dance anymore?
I'm still dancing. No, I stopped dancing sort of seriously about 35, but I was dancing all the way through while I was still playing rugby. Yeah.
Wow.
Mum used to do sort of charity shows every year, kids from age 3 up to, and she had a mum's class, and they went on to be grandmums, quite a lot of them. And we always did comedy numbers. I even danced with the dads one year. The dads came out and we did a pretend ballet, and all the old girls came out with long ballet dresses on, and you could hear the audience cringing a bit, thinking, these mothers and older women, what are they doing wearing ballet dresses, you know? And then the dads all came out. They realised it was a comedy. And I was the tallest, so I was at the back, and I came out, and then the smallest man, who was about 5 foot tall, came out. And they were doing sort of, the men were holding the women's waists, and they were doing entrechats in the air, holding them up, and the women were doing entrechats. And he was behind me, about 5 foot tall, and I was sort of nearly 6. And I was just not jumping. So we turned down, and because I was strong, I was lifting him up, and he was in the air, and he was doing this with his legs, and because the audience loved it. But it was a mixture of rugby and ballet.
That's amazing.
brilliant, that, isn't it?
So
That's so good.
Yeah, I've always thought there was a good mix there.
So it's quite nice that you've been able to balance that with your rugby career, because obviously back when you were playing the sport, it wasn't in a professional era that it is now.
That's right, yeah.
So I don't know, how did you approach that? Because was it kind of like a hobby?
Yeah, that was my Wednesday night training session. I did a couple of hours of, ballet tap. And then we always used to finish off after the session. We'd do an exercise to music class, which were very fashionable in the 80s and 90s. So we'd all don our lovely leotards and sweating for an hour doing ballet and tap. Yeah.
Wow.
That was a Wednesday night cross training at its best, I think.
You were also keen singers, weren't you? What was the go-to track when you were kind of getting ready to go out on the field?
Well, we didn't really sing before we went out onto the field. The only time I ever remember singing a song in the changing room was when we were at the European Championships in Nice, the first time it was on. The first time England were invited with a full-strength team. England sent the first team. And we'd been delayed. I think there was a problem with the journey. Coach either broke down or went to the wrong place. I know we all arrived at the venue for the final very, very late, and we had 15 minutes to get ready to go out to play a final.
15 minutes
And
before you actually go out.
Yeah, and it was very quiet in the changing rooms. I was captain, but there wasn't the time to go through anything, And I can remember we were all rushing to get changed, and somebody just started humming. I think it might have been Susie Appleby, actually.
I love Susie.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, well.
Just started humming Jerusalem. And then we started singing it. And I don't think I was ever ready for a game more.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Typical Susie, though. I can so imagine
I think
that as well.
I definitely, whether she was changing next to me, but we all sang Jerusalem heartily and did a few bend and stretch and loosened up. We like, come on, let's go. And we got out there and we played really well and we beat France, who were our main rivals at that time, and lifted the trophy. So we didn't routinely sing beforehand, but it sort of had a place, occasionally. But we're singing after the game, always.
Big time.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Do you do that a lot? Do you sing after the game?
Sometimes, if we've won, then yeah. But more like sort of in the changing rooms, and there's like a team bonding, and some of the girls are very like vocal and sing, but others are quite shy like myself. So I just stand in the back, but I support what they're doing. But
do the backing.
I'll tell you what though, I mean, playing for Waterloo up in Liverpool, we played all our games a long way away. We did play against Leeds, who were our local rivals, but most of the games were in London at the time, or the southwest. So if we could afford a coach, if we'd occasionally get a coach, we didn't play as well away as we played at home. We beat all the big teams at home, but we didn't beat them away. But sometimes after a thrashing, the best singing sessions are after you're not played particularly well or you've been beaten soundly. And we've got such fond memories of the day that Waterloo lost in the final of the National Cup of its day. We got absolutely battered by a fully international Saracens team. But my fond memories are on the coach on the way home, and we were all singing and we had a great day and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, you've got to turn everything into a positive. So singing's good for that.
Absolutely. It is good therapy, isn't it, singing?
Yeah.
That's why I love karaoke. I'm always on the microphone. Gill, going back, you were part of one of the first teams to be playing for England. You've seen women's rugby progress throughout the years, and it's come on leaps and bounds since you were involved. But what was life like back then? How did you juggle your life at the time? You were no doubt working, having to manage your hobbies that we were just talking about, but also wanting to take your sport seriously.
It was just, you made it happen. And I think most of the women who were playing representative rugby in those early years, once they played rugby, they were committed to it completely. And we all respected each other because everybody knew that each of us had a full-time job. Each of us tried to fit the training in around work. And I was a PE teacher, so lucky in a way, I was in a school with a gym and, I could do some training at school. But it was just this dedication to making it work and doing everything we could in a professional way without having any funding to do it. But we were professional with a little p. It's been said many times, but we absolutely were on those early days. But it was the love of the game, and I think because of the way we bought into the game in every way, I think that's why we're all still so committed and all still so part of this team that means so much to us all. Absolutely.
I mean, you've laid the foundations, as it were, and it's amazing that you are still so heavily involved with women's rugby. But when you were playing, just how tough was it? Did you feel frustrated in that circumstance? Because you're seeing the men and you're seeing what they're having to deal with, and then you're all having to balance your jobs, but also wanting to perform to the highest standards and, lay the foundations of what will become, hopefully, a professional sport. But you had no idea what you were up against or what you had to do to get there.
It was frustrating, but I think the worst thing we could have done is being the frustrated, angry person that annoys other people. So it was just about trying to change perceptions, trying to get people to accept how good the women's game was, accepting invitations to things like the London Old Boys Sevens tournament, which was held every year, and Wasps were asked to bring another Premiership team down to do a demonstration game. So Wasps invited us to come, I think because
Amazing.
they could have asked Saracens or Richmond, but games went one of either way for those teams. So they thought, we'll get Waterloo to come down. I'll have a good sing-song afterwards. I might even do Boogie Wonderland. But we'll get another Premiership team down to enjoy the day. And we played a demonstration game. I think it was 20 minutes each way. Or 25 minutes each way. It was a short game. But the thing I remember from that day is not the match. We did win, by the way. 4-0. Days when a try was 4 points. We won 4-0. But it was afterwards in the bar. We played before the men's final. all these hundreds and hundreds of old boys who'd played all day were buzzing about the women's game, and I've never seen women play before. God, it was really good. And there was a good smattering of international players. That Wasp side was quite full of internationals, so it was more than beginners at that point. And then the men's final was on, and all the attention was on the girls, and we were chatting away. And
Love that.
It was just, I mean, the men's final was great, but it's just about wakening people up to the fact that the women could play rugby too. And a lot of the things that we've done over the years have been to change perceptions and change the doubting Thomases who say women shouldn't play. Well, come and watch us, and then we'll have a chat afterwards.
Yeah, they soon change to tune, don't they, once they actually see
yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you were up against the impossible? Because I feel like if I put myself in your shoes back then, even now sometimes you feel like you're hitting your head against a brick wall. You just keep saying the same thing, like we want equality, we want to be seen. But back then it was a totally different world. We weren't getting the coverage that we get on the women's game now. That, you know, it was every day, it was a fight. Did you feel like that? Did you feel like sometimes just thinking, oh, this is actually too much of a big task?
No, we never gave up. And I think we all did it in a way that we didn't realise that we were making a difference. We certainly didn't know we were what so-called pioneers. We just wanted to play. We had to make things happen. Yeah. You know, so you had to bring everybody on board with you. You had to get the support. You had to get people to want to watch the women's game. So, yes, it was a struggle, but we all loved doing it because it was getting better and better all the time. Very small steps. It's taken a long time to get where we are now, but every little step was a positive movement. And I think if we'd complained all the time, people would have put barriers in the way. Men would have put barriers in the way. Women with old-fashioned ideas would have put barriers in the way. You know, we did a Channel 4 documentary way back in, I think it was 1990, when Great Britain played against Italy at Moseley. And the day before the game, Will Carling came as the headline. He was England captain at the time. And there was this whole programme about women in rugby. And I did have a VHS tape of it somewhere, and I'm going to try and find it, because nowadays people would be shocked, or there would be audible gasps of breath if people heard the phrasing. And, you know, these are women in rugby. And most of you know that women in rugby are normally found in the kitchens, and then it shows this nice old lady and the ladies' committee who's been making pies and beans for the boys for years, and they have a chat with her. And then they're saying sometimes the women are, you know, being a physio, and it's like, oh, a woman physio. But it was starting to say, and then it talked about our game, and Will Carling's voice, although he's supportive, he's a bit shocked. And I'd scored a try, and he said, and look, the try scorer is trying to kick a conversion from the touchline. And it's like, it's gone over. And it's almost
That's mental.
And it was probably the first time Will Carling had seen a women's game. He's an advocate of women's rugby now. He's a great supporter. But it's breaking those barriers. It's getting people to see that women actually do love the game. And women of all abilities play. So if you watch beginners play, and it'll be beginners rugby like beginners men would be. And if you watch international rugby, it's elite and it's entertaining. And it's just been about sharing the love of the game and hoping we spread the joy.
I bet that is buried in the archives somewhere, and they will never want that to be shown ever again, because I bet they're very embarrassed as well. But back then, that was normal.
We loved
wasn't
it because we were on Channel 4. It was on the television, and people were going, "Oh my God, it's brilliant! The women are on the telly." And a lot of people will have gone, "Gosh, women play." A little girl might have gone, "I'd love to play rugby, women play."
Yeah.
You know, it's little things like that.
It's good that you were getting the coverage, but I would be so intrigued to
find it.
Oh, yeah.
But that is massive, though. That's a huge step in itself, just being on Channel 4 and people seeing that, and I think that's...
I talked to the rugby writers, I think 2 years ago. I was invited to the rugby writers' dinner to give the closing address. And I thought, what am I going to talk about? And I thought, I know, I'm talking to rugby writers. I'll talk about the headlines and how they've changed. And it was obviously about the progression in the women's game from beginners to fantastic like it is now. And I just read a few of the headlines and a few of the comments that I've got out of my hundreds of photo albums and things that I've kept everything in. And audible gasps of breath in the room at some of the things that we're saying, you know, like scrumptious pictures of the girls all dressed in dressed like they had us all dressed up in before and after, like with your rugby kit, and then with dresses and makeup and hair. And I was Sugar Plum Fairy turns rugger scrum scary. That was one headline. There's all kinds. Honestly, they go on, and I can't remember them all now. But
Quite inventive, really.
But but at the time, I was in the Daily Star when I first played for England. It was the first game I'd had, and they came to my school where I taught in Warrington. And I had my Waterloo rugby shirt on, and they wanted some action photographs. And they did something which now you'd just go, no. But at the time, it was like the Daily Star wanted a photograph of me in the paper. Gave me a tutu. And there's a fantastic photograph of me diving through the air, perhaps a tad higher than Chris Ashton. Anyway, flying through the air, with the ball in my hand, joy on my face, to score a try for a picture, which was in the Daily Star. Now, patronising, yes, but the only reason why I was in the paper is because how can a dancer become a rugby player? And it was the contrast between. So it wasn't on the sports pages, but you did it because it got women's rugby in the paper, in a national paper, and people saw it. So it's cringeworthy. And I look at the photograph now and think, why did I say yes? But it was good that I said yes, because it shared the game. And there was similar things all the time with us, with the England girls around the country in their own sort of local papers and things like that.
Well, you got the exposure, didn't you, in the end?
Yeah. We were desperate for the exposure because that's the only way that you can grow the game.
Also, we sit here and we look back at the past and we've got hindsight, haven't we? You know, we've got the experience, we've lived through different experiences now, and life was different then. Yeah. So actually to just be getting these, you know, documentaries made or being in the paper, like that's amazing. And it is progress, no matter if it was, I don't know, maybe you look back and you think, oh, that was a little bit embarrassing. But at the time, it just felt like an opportunity. Yeah. And, you know, in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, we might be saying the same thing about now.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? But it's actually, without that media attention, then we wouldn't be where we are today, where we're seeing women's rugby players, but also just female athletes in the paper on a regular basis, being talked about, you know, having our family call us and being like, have you seen the girls are playing the netball or whatever? I feel like those conversations happen a lot more now, and it's thanks to you guys putting yourself out there and doing this stuff, which maybe wasn't always the most comfortable experiences for you. But it must have been exciting at the time.
Yeah, we loved it. We loved doing things for rugby, you know, and the fact that they wanted to come to my school. You know, I've had so many great opportunities where people have come to speak to me. You know, later on when I was at Range High School in Formby, which was the last school I taught in, I had a phone call from somebody said they'd like to, Cliff Morgan, the great Welsh legend, wanted to come and do an interview, and I was like nearly fell off my chair just the thought that Cliff Morgan would actually know my name. And Cliff Morgan came to school to meet me, and it was a little early. And we had a lovely lady that worked in the office who was a Scottish rugby fan, who was a massive rugby fan and loved the Lions of yesteryear. And when she saw him, it was like you know, this amazing megastar had come in, and she had to sit down and have somebody who was wiping her brow. She was just having a bit of a moment when she'd seen Cliff Morgan coming to school. And then I'd chat to Cliff Morgan, and Cliff Morgan writes a lovely article, and I think, I've pinched myself and think, how have I had this wonderful opportunity to spread the word with someone like him, you know, a legend of the game. So, you know, and then Stephen Jones from the Sunday Times, who's been one of our best supporters over the years, you know, really treated us like rugby players, not like just women. And he came to the school and did a wonderful article when I was England captain. A photographer that took a proper rugby photograph, and it was just such a great step forward from the original stuff we had, which was a bit derogatory, really, and sort of taking the mickey a bit, but started to spread the word. So,
and perception started to change as a result of that. And you know, now we're women are respected in that space, maybe a bit more so than they once were. Mm-hmm. When you were playing, did you feel like there was a huge comparison at the time between women's sport and men's sport? Did you feel like when people were watching it, they were always comparing it to the men's?
Quite a lot of people would say, you know, the women's game, it's a slower game, there's less kicking. And it's true, it was. But we were playing against other women, so it was comparatively as fast, and comparatively the kicks were going as far because we weren't competing with the men. You know, and I think the biggest difference in the game now is that everybody who's playing at the highest level has got time to hone those skills, and the fitness levels have gone through the roof. When we played, I'll be honest with you, some of us were quite fit, some of us weren't, were just skillful, and it was a mixture of talents or fitness that sort of made the elite teams of the day. And now everybody is sort of absolutely elite in both areas.
But they can commit their time, can't they?
Yeah.
Time.
Oh, to have had time to rest. I mean, that is something we used to dream of. I've always been when I was training a lot, I was always somebody who needed to sleep. You know, in between games, in between training sessions, we'd go back to room and I'd sleep. I'd literally go asleep for 20 minutes, get up, and it's just something I've always needed to do. So, you know, that would be on a training weekend, but to have had time to train during the week like that would have been fabulous, because I used to get up 5:30, go to the gym, do an hour and a bit in the gym in the morning, go to school, work all day, being a PE teacher, always did extracurricular, give kids opportunities to find the sport for them, and then train in the evenings. So I was generally exhausted, probably sleep deprived. So did my best, but I would love to have seen what I could have done had I actually had time to rest in between those sessions. But train almost every day. I think even on a Saturday, which was my general rest day, I'd go to the gym and do some light training, or I'd go and watch Waterloo men play. My other half used to play for them, and I used to wheel the exercise bike out of the gym at Waterloo, and I used to cycle watching the game, just like behind the sticks, just because I felt like I needed to train. I had a rowing machine at home, Concept 2, so if I missed a session, I could always do a sort of hit session or a 45-minute row or something at home. Yeah. So
that's a lot to balance. I mean, with work and training, was there ever a point, obviously, that easily can get on top of you? Was there ways where you made it easy for yourself, or tools you used to, you know, just make it that bit easier for yourself?
I think I always had a good break in the summer.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun socially, so you'd have a Friday night out, and we used to drink beers and go to town. I mean, sometimes, this is how amateurish we were in the very early years, in the 80s. Jane Mangum, now Jane Coates, my old mate from Waterloo, she won't mind me saying, England prop. Because we were playing for England, we felt that we had to perform well on a Sunday for Waterloo or Liverpool Poly, as it was originally. So we used to say, like, we'll just drink after the men's game. We'll stop drinking at 10:30 and have a pint of water, so that, you know...
The next day?
Yeah.
I love that.
And we'd probably have had 6 or 7 bottles of beer or something like that, but that was us being, you know, disciplined. It did get better once. Obviously, that was like late 80s, early 90s. I wouldn't have done that later in the career, when we got a bit more sort of education and realised, you know, what we needed. But yeah, we did have a great social. So the rugby girls were always really special, always will be, and we're still such good mates when we all get together. So that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the fitness testing that we used to do, I was as competitive in fitness testing as I was in the games, because I didn't want anyone in my position to get anywhere near me. And I think the last ones, I was 37 when I retired, and I beat everybody.
I love that. Absolute machine.
And I tell you what, it was like, I finished because I was in pain training, and you know, everything hurt, and I had to finish, and I wanted to finish at the top. And I almost felt more related with the fitness test results. I came second in the 5-metre sprint, second in the 15-metre sprint, and second in the 40-metre sprint. And I was gutted. But overall, it meant I was the fastest in the squad. You know, people are going, can't be right,
Gutted
can't
that
be
you
right.
came second.
Can't be. No, I was, but it was in the. So
Yeah,
I was and at 37, and I was absolutely made up, because it sort of made all that dedication and stuff worthwhile. And I think I was at my best, you know, playing wise, when I sort of retired at that World Cup in 2002 as well. So I was old. I was, you know, I started at 23, retired from England at 37. But
That's a long, like, an amazing career. Lots of players don't actually make it to to 37.
Yeah, but the first season, I think I played twice. The second season, we had maybe one game, England-Wales, and a GB game. So for the first few seasons, it wasn't... You had an England training camp in the odd game, but it was only sort of third and fourth seasons when we started with the 5 Nations and 6 Nations, and then the sort of Europeans and World Cups and things.
Finding the opposition, I guess, is finding other people who are playing to a certain level that you want to compete at as well. Right. You just touched on it there, and I just want to go back slightly. We always hear about what goes on tour, stays on tour, especially in regards to men's rugby. You know, we always hear different stories. But in terms of the women's side of things, you obviously enjoyed a night out, as we all do. But, you know, how crazy would it get? Is there any kind of stories that you can share with us that you don't have to name anyone, that they won't mind?
We were crazy in a nice way, and we didn't let it get over the top. And even the singing and all that sort of stuff. We didn't need to sing dirty songs. It wasn't like the lads all had these dirty rugby songs. And I'd say we can sing nice songs and have just as much fun. Yeah. And we did sing songs that, you know, you wouldn't imagine rugby players would sing, but we had a great time. I can remember one England-France game away, which was in a big sports hall, because France tended to play late at night, and you'd all go into a sports hall and there'd be some sort of, I don't know, canapé-y type stuff to nibble on and stuff. But it was in a sports hall, and there were actually ropes, you know, like gym ropes. And I can remember at one point, there was several England girls, like, up these ropes, like hanging upside down, and that was about as mad as it got, yeah. So yeah, I think we were always well behaved. There was never any sort of anything that would be bordering on criminal. It was always good behaviour, a few beers, singing and laughing. We played against Holland the first time away, and they had a band came in, and one of our girls played the trumpet and got the trumpet off the band player. I can remember somebody got the cymbals, and they were crashing the cymbals. I had a tambourine, and we were joining in with this big band that were playing, and we had a great time. And the following day, the only injuries we had was cymbal forehead, where somebody'd banged the cymbals and had cut the forehead, and somebody'd run into them. And I had tambourine thigh. I had bruises all down my thigh.
Tambourine thigh? I can't say I've ever heard of that. You hit it too hard.
Yeah, honestly, I had bruises all down my thigh. Looked like I'd been trampled in the game, but it was actually the tambourine afterwards. So yeah, lots of singing, lots of laughter, lots of dancing, just having fun together.
Just a good time.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. I want to go out with you guys. I'd be with the mic just singing along. Can I go? Again, just talking about your playing days. You came runner-up in the World Cup in 1991. What lessons were learnt from that experience that you took into 1994 when you did win?
I think, personally, on the day, after the game, reflected and thought, we were just not streetwise for that game. We had the ability to beat the team that had beaten us, and they were just a little bit more streetwise. They'd all played a bit longer. They were savvy to what was going on, and we gave tries away, and it was really frustrating. And I think we just learnt more about the game between 91 and 94. Steve Dowling, who was our coach, really sort of started focusing a bit more off the pitch. We were doing a bit more work off the pitch, more sort of team meetings, and we'd start to have game plans. I mean, almost the first few years of England, it was a little bit vague, and just use your skills and see what you see in front of you, which I think is still very important. But I think it just became a little bit more structured, and we all used to know what would happen in certain areas of the pitch. If this happened, what would happen next, those sorts of things. But I think the joy of playing in the era when I played was very much that it was all about, and I'll use a phrase that an old friend once said to me, Simon Hogg, his name was, played at Exeter, I think. He played down that way somewhere, and he said to me, I always say, see, read, play. And I always remembered that, because your head's got to be up, you've got to see what's in front of you, you read what's in front of you, and then you play. And I always used to try and say that to people I played with. We know what we should do if all goes as expected. However, if we all see, we will all read and play together, and we'll do something different. And there was a little bit more chance to use our own nous and see what gaps were open, and somebody would be there with you because everybody had their heads up and was seeing and reading and playing, as opposed to this, after the second breakdown we will do this and we will run to there and this will go. It's all got a bit metronomic towards the end. not so much my playing career, but that sort of era from the 2000s to now, it's all become a bit very structured.
I love that though. I'm gonna take that on board.
Well, it was somebody, it was a fella, an elite player who was a fly half who we'd gone on a social tour with. We'd had a great time with them on the social tour. And it's something he said to me which has remained with me, and I've shared with lots of the kids I've worked with at school and any sort of rugby teams I've worked with before. See, read and play.
Is it a bit more regimented now, Jodie, do you think?
There's a lot of structure, especially like obviously Exeter Chiefs. Our game plan is so structured, and sometimes I feel like I'm thinking more about the structure than actually just playing and reading the game. But I think that's just how it is now. It's just very, because the analysis and the detail players and coaches go into it. So I think it's great that we have got structure, but sometimes I do wish we could just play rugby.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? See it and just, like you said, just play. But I suppose that's just sort of where it is at the moment.